Meanwhile, Femi's relationship with Adanna began to suffer. Her constant warnings about Baba Ade grated on his nerves, and he felt torn between his wife's accusations and his neighbor's apparent goodwill. "You've changed, Adanna," Femi said one evening after another tense dinner. "You're always on edge, always accusing someone. I don't know how to help you anymore."
Adannas heart sank.
"Femi, I'm not making this up. Baba Ade is dangerous, and I need you to believe me. Why can't you see what's happening?" "Because there's no proof." Femi shot back, his voice rising. "You're asking me to condemn a man who has done nothing but help us. I can't do that, Adanna." Adanna swallowed her frustration. She realized that arguing with Femi was futile. He was too blinded by his perception of Baba Ade to see the truth. That night, as Femi slept, Adanna sat by the window, staring out into the darkness. She saw a shadow move near Baba Ade's house and felt a chill run down her spine. She knew she couldn't rely on Femi. Whatever happened next, she would have to face it alone. A week later, Adanna was approached by Ronk, Baba Ade's second wife. Like Saad, Ronk seemed nervous but determined. She stopped Adanna near the market, pulling her aside into a quiet alley. "Adanna, listen to me carefully," Ronk began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Saad told me she spoke to you, but I need to say this myself. Baba Ade won't stop until he gets what he wants. You need to leave before it's too late." Adanna felt a mixture of gratitude and frustration. "Why do you stay with him if he's so dangerous?" Ronk's eyes filled with tears. "I don't have a choice. He's taken everything from me, my family, my freedom. But you still have a chance. Don't let him trap you." Adanna's throat tightened. "I can't leave. This is my home, and my husband won't believe me." Ronk shook her head sadly. "Then you must protect yourself. Don't trust anyone, not even the neighbors. Baba Ade has them all under his thumb." Before Adanna could respond, Ronk hurried away, her head down. Adanna stood in the alley, her heart pounding. The warnings were clear, but the path forward seemed impossibly murky. Adanna's worst fears came to pass one evening when Femi was out late working. She was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when she heard a knock at the door. Her stomach tightened as she approached, peering through the peephole. It was Baba Ade. "Go away," she called through the door, her voice trembling. "Adanna," Baba Ade said calmly, "I just want to talk. Open the door." "I have nothing to say to you," she replied, stepping back from the door. There was a long silence before Baba Ade spoke again, his tone darker this time. "You think you can ignore me, but you can't. I always get what I want, Adanna. Remember that." Adanna's hands shook as she locked the door and turned off the lights, retreating to the bedroom. She sat on the bed, clutching her phone, ready to call for help if necessary. Hours later, when Femi returned, she told him what had happened. But instead of concern, she was met with frustration. "Adanna, this is getting out of hand," Femi said, his voice tight. "You're letting your fear control you. Baba Ade wouldn't hurt you. You're imagining things." Adanna stared at him in disbelief. "He threatened me, Femi. How can you not see that?" Femi sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'll talk to him tomorrow. But I don't think he meant it the way you think he did." Adanna turned away, her heart heavy. She realized that Femi's refusal to act was more dangerous than Baba Ade's threats. Adanna sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at the envelope of money she had hidden for weeks. Her hands trembled as she thought of the options before her. She could leave, run far away with her unborn child, and start over in a place where Baba Ade's shadow couldn't reach her. But where would she go? And how would she explain to Femi why she had left? The other option was to turn to Femi's parents. Mama Femi and Papa Femi were kind and protective, and Adanna believed they would take her side. They had always treated her like their own daughter, and she was sure they would listen. But would Femi believe his own parents if they sided with her? She doubted it. Adanna pressed her hands to her stomach, feeling the faint movements of her unborn child. "I have to protect you," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Even if it means leaving everything behind." But something held her back. A small, desperate hope that Femi would finally see the truth, that he would protect her like he once promised on their wedding day. The thought of leaving him, of breaking their family apart, was a pain she wasn't ready to bear. Baba Ade sat in his darkened room, surrounded by burning candles and bowls of herbs. His wives had long since gone to bed, but he remained, consumed by thoughts of Adanna. She had resisted him at every turn, and it infuriated him. "She's different," he muttered, grinding dried leaves into a fine powder. "But even she can't resist me forever." Baba Ade had turned to his last resort, a spell. He had long dabbled in dark practices, using charms and incantations to bend others to his will. But Adanna's spirit was strong, too strong for him to enchant directly. If she wouldn't come close enough, he would go through her husband. Placing the powder in a small leather pouch, he whispered an incantation under his breath. The words were ancient, passed down through generations of his ancestors. When the spell was complete, he smiled to himself. "Femi will bring her to me," he said, his voice low and triumphant. "He will see things my way." The next morning, Femi woke up feeling strange. His head was heavy, and his thoughts felt clouded. As he got ready for work, he found himself thinking of Baba Ade, not with suspicion, but with a sense of trust that seemed unnatural. "Maybe Adanna really is overreacting," he thought to himself, shaking his head. "Baba Ade has been nothing but kind. She just doesn't understand him." That day, Femi went out of his way to spend time with Baba Ade. They shared a drink at the local bar, laughing and talking as if they were old friends. Baba Ade subtly planted ideas in Femi's mind, sowing seeds of doubt about Adanna's behavior. "Sometimes women act out when they're pregnant," Baba Ade said, his tone casual. "They get emotional, start imagining things. You just have to be patient with her." Femi nodded, his thoughts growing muddled. He found himself agreeing with everything Baba Ade said, even when it didn't quite make sense. By the time he returned home, the spell had taken root. That evening, Femi came home in an unusually cheerful mood. He kissed Adanna on the cheek and spoke animatedly about his day, but something in his demeanor felt off. "How was Baba Ade?" Adanna asked cautiously. "He's a good man," Femi said firmly, almost defensively. "I don't know why you insist on seeing him as a threat. He cares about us, Adanna. You should be grateful." Adanna stared at him, her chest tightening. This wasn't Femi. His words sounded rehearsed, as if someone else had planted them in his mind. "Femi," she said carefully, "can't you see how strange this is? You've never talked like this before." "I'm tired of this, Adanna," Femi snapped, his voice sharp. "You're the one acting strange. Maybe you need to stop imagining things and focus on our family." Adanna felt her heart break a little. She realized then that Baba Ade had somehow gotten to Femi, twisting his thoughts and turning him against her. That night, Adanna sat alone in the bedroom, tears streaming down her face. She knew she couldn't wait any longer. Whether she ran or went to Femi's parents, she had to act quickly. Baba Ade's influence was growing, and she feared that if she didn't leave soon, she might lose everything. The next morning, Adanna woke up with a renewed sense of determination. If Femi wouldn't believe her, then she would turn to the people she trusted most, his parents. Mama Femi and Papa Femi had always been supportive, and Adanna was certain they would listen. As Femi left for work, Adanna packed a small bag with essentials and called a taxi. She didn't tell Femi where she was going. She couldn't risk him trying to stop her. As the taxi navigated the bustling streets, she prayed silently, asking for courage and wisdom. The journey to Femi's parents' home took an hour, but it felt like a lifetime. When she arrived, Mama Femi was outside tending to her garden. She looked up in surprise as Adanna approached, her face lighting up with a warm smile. "Adanna, my dear, what brings you here so early?" Mama Femi asked, wiping her hands on her wrapper. Adanna hugged her tightly, tears threatening to spill. "Mama, I need to talk to you and Papa. It's important." Seated in the living room, with Papa Femi joining them, Adanna poured out her heart. She told them everything: Baba Ade's stalking, his threats, and Femi's refusal to see the truth. Mama Femi gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Adanna, are you serious? This man has been harassing you?" "Yes, Mama," Adanna said, her voice trembling. "I've tried to tell Femi, but he won't believe me. And now Femi seems different, like Baba Ade has some kind of hold on him." Papa Femi, usually a man of few words, frowned deeply. "This is a serious matter. If what you're saying is true, we cannot let it continue." "I'm scared, Papa," Adanna admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't know what to do anymore. I thought about running, but I don't want to leave Femi behind. Please help me." Mama Femi reached out and held Adanna's hand tightly. "You are our daughter, Adanna. We won't let anything happen to you. We'll talk to Femi, and we'll deal with this Baba Ade." Later that evening, Femi arrived at his parents' house, confused by their summons. When he walked into the living room and saw Adanna sitting there, his face darkened. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Sit down, Femi," Papa Femi said firmly. "We need to talk." Reluctantly, Femi sat, his eyes darting between his parents and Adanna. "Is this about Baba Ade again?" "Yes," Mama Femi said, her voice laced with anger. "Adanna has told us everything. That man has been harassing her, and you've done nothing to stop it." Femi groaned, rubbing his temples. "Mama, you don't understand. Baba Ade isn't like that. He's been a good neighbor to us. Adanna is just overreacting." "Overreacting?" Papa Femi barked, his voice booming. "Your wife is being stalked and threatened, and you call it overreacting? What kind of man does that make you, Femi?" Femi flinched but remained silent. "Son, open your eyes," Mama Femi pleaded. "This man has bewitched you. Can't you see how strange your behavior has been? This isn't you." Femi frowned, the words hitting a nerve. Deep down, he felt a nagging doubt, a sense that something was wrong. But Baba Ade's influence over him was strong, clouding his thoughts. That night, Femi couldn't sleep. His parents' words echoed in his mind, clashing with the loyalty he felt toward Baba Ade. For the first time, he began to question himself. Had Adanna been right all along? Was he so blinded by Baba Ade's charm that he had ignored the signs? Unable to shake his unease, Femi got out of bed and walked to the living room, where Adanna sat awake, clutching a cup of tea. She looked up as he entered, her expression wary. "Adanna," Femi began hesitantly, "do you really think Baba Ade is dangerous?" Adanna's eyes filled with tears. "Femi, I don't just think it, I know it. He's been tormenting me for months. And now I'm afraid he's coming for you too." Femi sat beside her, the weight of her words pressing down on him. For the first time, he allowed himself to see things from her perspective. "I'll talk to him," Femi said quietly. "Not as his friend, but as your husband. If he's done the things you say, I'll put an end to it." Adanna nodded, though she felt a flicker of doubt. She hoped it wasn't too late for Femi to break free of Baba Ade's spell. The ride home was quiet but tense. Adanna kept glancing at Femi, wondering if he would truly follow through on his promise to confront Baba Ade. For the first time in weeks, He had sounded like the man she married, a rational, protective husband. But as they pulled into the driveway and saw Baba Ade standing outside his house, everything changed. Femi was talking rationally until he got back home with his wife and they saw Baba Ade again. He became a different person and didn't listen to anyone except Baba Ade.
Ha, Femi.
Baba Ade called out, his booming voice cutting through the night air. He waved cheerfully, a wide smile plastered on his face. Femi's posture shifted immediately. His expression softened, and a strange glaze appeared in his eyes. He stepped out of the car without a word to Adanna and walked toward Baba Ade. "Good evening, Baba," Femi said warmly, as though the tension of the past weeks had never existed. Adanna watched in horror as her husband began laughing and chatting with the very man who had tormented her. She stepped out of the car and grabbed Femi's arm.
Femi, come inside.
"We need to talk." But Femi shook her off, his face darkening. "Adanna, stop this nonsense. Baba Ade is my friend. You're the one who needs to calm down." Baba Ade's smile widened as he looked at Adanna. There was a glint of malice in his eyes, and she felt a chill run down her spine. "Good night, Adanna," Baba Ade said, his tone mocking. "Take good care of your husband." The next morning, Adanna called Mama Femi in tears, recounting what had happened. Mama Femi wasted no time. By midday, she was at their doorstep, a determined look on her face. As soon as Mama Femi stepped inside, she felt a strange heaviness in the air. The house was eerily quiet, and the once warm and inviting atmosphere now felt cold and oppressive. "Adanna, where is Femi?" Mama Femi asked. "He's out with Baba Ade," Adanna said, her voice trembling. Mama Femi's face hardened. "That man again. Something is not right here." She began to walk around the house, murmuring prayers under her breath. When she reached the living room, she stopped abruptly. Her eyes fell on a small, unfamiliar object tucked beneath the couch. Bending down, she picked it up. It was a charm, a small bundle of sticks and cloth bound together with red string. As soon as she touched it, a wave of nausea swept over her. "This house is under attack," Mama Femi whispered. That evening, Mama Femi called a trusted spiritual elder from her church, Papa Olu, to visit the house. When he arrived, he carried a Bible, a bottle of anointing oil, and a deep sense of foreboding. After a brief prayer, Papa Olu walked through the house, his face growing grimmer with each step. When he reached the living room, he paused and turned to Mama Femi and Adanna. "Your instincts were right," Papa Olu said. "There's a dark presence in this home. But it's not just the house. It's that man, Baba Ade." "What do you mean?" Adanna asked, her heart racing. Papa Olu sighed, his eyes filled with concern. "Baba Ade is not an ordinary man. He is a spirit, a malevolent being that once dwelled in the forests. When the forests were destroyed for development, he sought refuge among humans, disguising himself as one of us. But his nature is unchanged. He thrives on lust, control, and destruction." Mama Femi gasped, clutching her chest. "And he has targeted my son and his wife." "Yes," Papa Olu confirmed. "He has used charms to manipulate Femi's mind and sow discord in this family. If we do not act quickly, his influence will grow stronger." Adanna felt a mixture of fear and relief. The strange happenings in her life finally made sense, but the danger was far greater than she had imagined. "What can we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We must break his hold over Femi and cleanse this house," Papa Olu said firmly. "But it will not be easy. Baba Ade will fight back. He will use every trick at his disposal to keep his power." Mama Femi nodded resolutely. "We will not let him win. Adanna, you are not alone in this. We will fight together." That night, the family began preparations for a spiritual battle. They prayed fervently, anointed the house with oil, and burned the charm they had found. Papa Olu promised to return the next day with more members of his church to help. As Adanna lay in bed that night, she felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in weeks, She believed they might have a chance to reclaim their lives. But she also knew that Baba Ade would not give up easily, and the real fight was only just beginning. The next morning, as the family prepared for their spiritual cleansing, Baba Ade was already aware of their plans. Sitting in his dimly lit room, surrounded by bowls of herbs and strange relics, he muttered incantations under his breath. "They think they can defeat me," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Let them try." With a wave of his hand, Baba Ade summoned a dark mist that filled the room. His eyes glowed faintly as he whispered commands to the spirits under his control. "Go to them. Confuse them. Make them doubt their faith." As the mist dispersed into the air, Baba Ade smiled, confident that his retaliation would weaken the family before they could even begin their battle. Back at the house, the family gathered in the living room with Papa Olu and 3 other church elders. They began to pray, their voices rising in unison. But as the prayers grew stronger, strange things started to happen. The lights flickered, and a cold wind swept through the room, though all the windows were closed. Adanna clutched her stomach, feeling a sudden wave of nausea. Mama Femi noticed and quickly placed a hand on her shoulder. "Stay strong, my dear," she said. "This is his doing. He's trying to scare us." Papa Olu stood firm, his voice commanding. "Do not be afraid. This is a test of our faith. We must press on." The elders continued to pray, anointing every corner of the house with oil. But the air grew heavier, and faint whispers could be heard, as if someone or something was watching them. Meanwhile, Baba Ade's anger boiled as he sensed the family's resistance. He slammed his fist on the table, his charm beads rattling ominously. "They are stronger than I thought," he muttered. "But no one defies me and wins." He decided to take a more direct approach. Late that night, as the family rested after their exhausting prayers, Baba Ade approached their house. Standing in the shadows, he raised his hand and muttered an incantation. The windows of the house began to rattle violently, and a deafening noise filled the air. Femi, who had been sitting alone in the living room, froze. His glazed eyes widened as Baba Ade's voice echoed in his mind. "Come to me, Femi," the voice commanded. "Leave them. They are your enemy." Without thinking, Femi rose from his seat and began walking toward the door. But just as he reached for the handle, Mama Femi appeared, blocking his path. "Femi, where are you going?" she demanded. Femi blinked, confusion flickering across his face. I don't know," he stammered. Mama Femi grabbed his hand and began to pray fervently. The whispers in Femi's mind grew louder, but her prayers drowned them out. Finally, Femi collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. Thank you for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed it and want to hear more captivating tales, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next story.